Hello and welcome to the Kentucky Today podcast. I'm Lawrence Smith, the editor of Kentucky Today. 3 years ago, the International Mission Board of the Southern Baptist Convention launched Project 3000. That's an effort to reach the more than 3,000 unreached people groups in the world. The IMB is sending what it calls explorers around the globe to locate those people and find out the best way to reach them with the gospel. A woman from Kentucky was one of those explorers. She's back home now and telling her story. Now, for security reasons, we cannot show her face and we're using a fake name, Ava Taylor. But here is our conversation with Ava Taylor about her adventure and what it's like to be a IMB Explorer. First, talk about your decision, if you would, to get involved in the Project 3000 Explorer program. How did that happen?
Yeah, so I have kind of always been interested in missions. I grew up in a Southern Baptist church, and we often had IMB missionaries come in and just share about their time overseas. So I knew I always was intrigued with cultures and different people groups. And so I knew I wanted to go into missions overseas. And then, so I applied with the IMB. And originally, I'd actually applied for a job in Italy to do a 2-year term there. And then I came across the guy that's kind of in charge of Project 3000. And he was just pitching the idea of traveling Europe and, reaching the truly unreached people groups that there are left in the world. And my heart was just broken for UUPGs. And so, I prayed about it. And I just felt like God was calling me to do this job because it's very specific to a certain group, and I fit the criteria, and so I was like, why not while I'm able? So that's how I ended up doing this job.
Now, you sound pretty young, so I have to ask what your parents thought of your going off on this adventure.
Yeah, so they weren't super thrilled at first, traveling around, single female on her own, not super thrilled about it, but they're both believers and they totally understand the work, and they were excited about it. And super proud of the work that we've done. And don't worry, my dad was tracking me at all times, for sure.
I'm sure he was.
Every day.
So what kind of training did you receive before you were dispatched? I know that it didn't just send you out there. What kind of preparation was there?
Yeah, so we had as the IMB as a whole has what they call field personnel orientation. So you go to Virginia for 7 weeks and you do intense training. And then specifically for Project 3000, we have a little extra training of just learning mapping, different mapping skills, and learning how to basically to find your way around. And we had some exercising that we did, lots of running and push-ups and sit-ups to make sure we're in good physical shape, because you are kind of in some hard places sometimes with this job. And just intense training of just like how to abide in the Lord, as this job is you are kind of out there on your own, honestly. I mean, you're partnered with another person, but it's just the two of you. And so you don't have a lot of church community. And so sometimes it can get hard. So there's a lot of training of how to be abiding as you're going, and just how to be strong in your faith.
You mentioned you were partnered with someone. You did not go alone. Your partner, I understand, was older than you. So how did that relationship develop over time?
Yeah, so she was the exception to the under 30 rule, but she was in tip-top shape. She runs marathons, very outdoorsy. So this job was right up her alley. She loved research. And so she killed it. She did such good work over there. But as you can imagine, you're partnered with this person. So you're living with them, you're working with them, you're traveling with them, you're together 24/7. So as you can imagine, you become fast friends, right? So she was great. And we traveled all over Europe together, researching groups, and, we worked well together, and we really enjoyed each other.
You mentioned Europe, and I know you can't, for security reasons, tell us exactly what countries you were in, but give us some idea of the how many places you were, how many places you visited, and kind of the cultures that you encountered.
Yeah, so the overall goal for us was 10 people groups each, is what we've been assigned. And so together, I think we got to like 22 or 23 different people groups in a bunch of countries. I think it's up to like 25 countries maybe in Europe and beyond. Um, yeah, and so we researched many different cultures. I can throw out some of the people groups. We reached Serbians, Armenians, um, Slovenians, lots and lots of different groups, a lot of different religions as well. You have Orthodoxy, Catholicism, um, Islam. Yeah, so researching a lot of different cultures and a lot of different groups.
It's interesting because you think of unreached people groups as being in some far-flung, maybe third world countries, but these were places in Europe.
Yes, yes, that's kind of a shock to all of us, really. Because yeah, we don't imagine, we imagine these indigenous groups, tribal groups in the middle of, like Africa or somewhere, but yeah, they're right here in Europe, and even in the States, they're here as well.
That's a lot of territory that you covered. And how long were you doing this?
Yeah, so it's a 2 to 3 year term, and I served 2 years overseas.
Was there ever a time during your travels where you felt unsafe?
No, Europe is a very safe environment, and so no, I never felt unsafe.
What about opposition as far as culturally? Did you encounter a lot of opposition to the gospel?
I would say Europe as a whole is not extremely open. It's a very cold culture, just in general. And so trying to build relationships in such a fast, time period was kind of tough. So there is a little opposition to the gospel, just in general. Um, but I will have to say, I feel like the younger generation, they're very curious and they're very open. And I think they are so far removed from like church and any religion that they are becoming more and more curious about, well, who is this God that you talk about? So there was a little opposition, um, but overwhelmingly, I was surprised that the curiosity as well amongst the younger generation.
So, is there a story or two that sticks out in your mind in your travels?
Yeah, there was one in particular that will always stick with me just because I was like, wow, that was truly God. That had nothing to do with me. I had a national partner that was with me. She was Italian, and we were running in Italy looking for a few different groups. And uh, we were looking in a place that has no evangelical presence whatsoever, no church at all, and it was very spiritually dark. And so we were like, well, where do we start? Because typically we would start our research with the church, right? If there was an evangelical church, we would start there. And we were like, well, now that there's not one, we were clueless as to what to do next. And so we prayed about it. And I asked her, I was like, Jess, pick a church on the outskirts of this area. Let's start there and just see what they have to say. So she picked this church, and we showed up on a Sunday morning, and the pastor was like asking us, what are you doing here? Like, blah, blah, blah. He was very curious. So we were telling him about the work. And he was like, wow, that's so amazing that you guys are here, because I literally just prayed yesterday for God to show me what was next for me, because I'm a church planner and I'm looking at where to plant next. And I think you guys are the answer to that. And so we partnered with this church, and now they're looking to plant a church in this area that doesn't have one. So that was
Wow.
really, really cool.
Yeah, incredible how God works.
Yeah.
What was the most challenging part of this for you, and what did the Lord teach you in that challenge?
Yeah, this job is challenging in a few different ways. But the number one thing for me was just the lack of community that does come with this kind of work, right? You're bouncing around everywhere. We moved every 2 weeks. And so you're not in one place for very long. And so community is tough. And so I think just honestly, my dependence on God became so great because I mean, there were some times where it does get very lonely. And it does feel like it's just you and the Lord out there. And so I think my dependence on him grew immensely.
Now you've gathered all this information. What happens to it now? What does the IMB do with it?
Yeah, so the end goal is to take this information and talk to teams who are on the field long term and decide, okay, well, do we need a separate strategy to reach this people group with the gospel? Do they have access in their language? If not, how can we reach them? Um, you know, so just coming up with different strategies and different ways to reach these groups.
You finished the program now, I assume. What's next?
Yeah, that's a great question. I am still praying about that.
All this, of course, was made possible by generous giving through the cooperative program. What's your message to Kentucky Baptists who faithfully supported the IMB and your work through the cooperative program?
Yes, I cannot say thank you enough to Southern Baptist churches that give to the cooperative program because it truly does go straight to your missionaries and it helps us, it supports us and gives us the freedom to go out and share the gospel on a daily basis without having to worry about, raising support. And so we have a freedom to go out and share and not have to worry about that. So I cannot say thank you enough to people who give to that because it truly helps and it is such a blessing to everyone. And so I cannot say thank you enough.
Well, it's been a blessing to talk to you. Thank you for the work that you've done, and may the Lord bless you as you explore your next steps.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. And I would just have to say, we are looking for more project explorers. And so if anyone under the age of 30 who's active and outdoorsy at all, which in Europe, you don't have to be super outdoorsy, but um, if you have any interest, we would love to talk to you. So you can reach out to the IMB and then we would love to talk to you.
Let's bring in managing editor Mark Maynard and content editor Chip Hutchison. Guys, I don't know about you, but I think the qualification as far as being in tip-top shape and outdoorsy would probably disqualify all of us in that for this job. But I know as a young journalist, I did some pretty risky things, but never really anything like this. Mark, you talked to her as well. What was your impression of her and what she's doing?
Yeah, I was so impressed with her, Lawrence. Just her, you can just tell by talking to her confidence and it's not just her self confidence, but her confidence in the Lord and what He's doing in her life. And she's definitely somebody who prayed about this. It wasn't something. It wasn't just an adventure. It was a lot more than that to her. And you obviously you got to take you got to take that so seriously. You don't know where you're going. I mean, I can't imagine even, I know she's 30, but I can't imagine doing that at 30 or 20 or any age, especially now. And I think, she gave a different picture of it than I think what a lot of people think about. Because I think a lot of people think it's out in the bush somewhere. It's, you're going in places like that. She's going in normal European countries. And, even as she said, she wasn't really afraid for her safety or anything. They weren't maybe as receptive as she had hoped, but that's what we do, right? For people that aren't receptive, we talk to them and we try to convince them that there is this God, there is a God that's going to take care of you, there is a God that cares for our every needs. And she did that beautifully. And I can't imagine the experience she had though, really, over 2 years of doing that. That's a whirlwind for sure. And I can't believe their term is 3 years, really, even, or you can take a 3-year term, but, she took 2. But anyway, it was a great interview. And, I would encourage people, and we'll have a story about her and we'll try to put an email address for churches that would like to have her come and speak. She's very willing to do that. So if Kentucky Baptist churches want to have an Explorer 3000 missionary come and speak at their church, she's willing to do that.
Well, Chip, could you see yourself doing that in your 20s?
No, I sure could not. But Lawrence, we look at this and we think about the younger generation and those of us of our age demographic. We sometimes dismiss the younger generation, but this should give us hope that God is still at work in the lives of young people, to allow them and to encourage and motivate and call them to serve in areas that are not comfortable, where we live in the Bible Belt where people are open to the gospel, at least they say they are, but these young people are in areas where they're not open to the gospel. So I'm encouraged by it. And she said one thing that really I think needs to be highlighted: her parents' apprehension. Even as believers, are apprehensive about her going to this. And when you talk about IMB missionaries, and if you ask them as they're being sent, what's the greatest thing we can pray about for you? They will overwhelmingly say, please pray for our parents, because they do not understand why we're doing this. Well, they're doing it for the glory of God.
Very good point. What struck me, of course, is her Christian maturity, but also I was surprised by the fact that so much of Europe, the birthplace of the Reformation, is considered unreached. That tells us something about the importance of the church doing its job and not compromising the truth.
Absolutely. We have more places to reach than our corners of America, for sure. And even as she said, there's even some here in the United States who haven't heard about the gospel as well. But it is really mind blowing to think in Europe and the different places she has been, that it would be so cold to the gospel, and not just cold, but just don't care about what it is, and don't know about it, and don't understand it. It's really eye opening, for sure.
Well, God bless her, and God bless the Project 3000 project. And as you said, Mark, she's willing to go into churches and tell her story, and we hope to have some contact information that's secure that churches can use to get hold of her. All right, we've endured, as you guys know, a winter storm over the past few days, several feet of snow, which is unusual for Kentucky, and very cold, single digits right now. But as usual, Mark, the Kentucky Baptist Disaster Relief and Send Relief are on the job, stepping in to help. Talk about the stories that you wrote on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, last week, Lawrence, I called before the storm. I called Ron Crow, our great director, because I knew he'd be on top of things already. And I said, what's the plan? Do you have a plan, or are you, and he's like, well, we don't, there's no snow yet, but he said, I'm getting all these forecasts are driving me crazy, because of course it was anywhere from an inch to 55 inches, of snow. So he didn't know really where he was going to go. But he said, we're going to be ready. He said, I've got people calling. I got volunteers calling. Are we going? Are we going? And I'm like, not yet, but probably. And of course, the snow hits, and, it really, the ice really hit Tennessee very hard, and South Central Kentucky, all that area really got just blasted by the ice, which, a lot of Kentucky kind of missed that part of it. Thankfully, I know most areas got a little bit of ice, but mostly it was snow, and maybe not even as much snow as they thought.
Well, by the way, just a correction, I said several feet of snow a minute ago. It's several inches. If it were several feet, we'd be in real trouble.
Well, you'd have thought several feet with the way they were talking last week. So, I can see why you said that. But, last night, Ron actually sent an email out to a few of us about that they put a team together that was going to set up at Calgary Baptist in Glasgow. And they were actually called by the Salvation Army to support for food. And they wanted them to feed, at least I think it's at least 800. Coy Webb sent an email out, and he said 1,200. So we'll see how many they have to feed. But a lot of the meals are also going to the border, Tennessee, in 4 counties there, right on the border. So they are doing what they do. The Kentucky Baptist Disaster Relief, they go out, they feed, they build, they fix, but mainly they testify. to who the Lord is, and that's their main job. That's what they do best. And just as another side note, there's a group of 8 who are going to Jamaica. Now that sounds pretty good right now, especially right now. But they're going on a work duty, and you know, a lot of people may not have known, if you know, depending on how closely you follow the news, but Hurricane Melissa hit Jamaica back in late October and did a lot of damage. I mean, just tore that place up. And they're going into, they're actually right near the ocean, you know, where they're going. I said, Tommy Floyd, the AMS in Lake Cumberland, is leading that group. And I said, are you taking suntan oil and the swimming trunks? He said, well, I don't know. We'll see. But he did say it was 86 degrees there. So they'll enjoy that maybe. But he sent me some pictures, and, you know, such damage. I mean, roofs are gone. And this is mostly a construction and rebuild team that's going. And they're going to be there for a week. So they leave Saturday and they come back the following Saturday on February 7th. And they're doing the Lord's work. You know, they're not going on vacation or anything like that. And I asked him, I said, how many of these guys have been to Jamaica? Have you ever been? He said, I hadn't been, but he said one guy had gone to do some Bible school, vacation Bible schools, or, you know, neighborhood things, some mission work. And he said, another guy stopped there after a cruise. So I said, well, at least you'll say you've been to Jamaica. And he's like, that's right. And, you know, I know they'll share the gospel with everybody they come in touch with.
And Chip, these volunteers are amazing, whether it's the tropics of Jamaica or the freezing temperatures, sub-freezing temperatures we're experiencing right now. These folks are ready to go.
They are. And, you know, that sounds good going to Jamaica, but just getting there is a challenge anymore. And the problems with weather and airport terminals, kudos to them for their willingness to go. And as Mark said, it's not a vacation, it is a work project, and they do great work. And I'm so thankful we have people who, first of all, have those gifts and those skills, and then on top of that, the willingness to go wherever they can be a blessing to people.
You both wrote stories this past week about how churches, Kentucky Baptist churches, adapted to the winter storm. Mark, yours went first. Talk about the one that you wrote about.
Yeah, I talked to Abram Crozier at Trinity Southern, and that is in Falmouth, Kentucky. And he decided, I think the day before, or Friday, but the day before, they set their service on Saturday morning. They just moved everything back 24 hours. They still had Sunday school. They still had 2 worship services. They got through at 12 or, 12:15, whatever. Everything was the same, except it was on Saturday. Well, they got the word out enough that they filled the place. And not only that, but 2 of the churches in the community decided they were going to bring their people over as well. One of them was his dad's church, First Baptist of Falmouth. And they all came over, and they just had a great time, meeting together. They didn't have to worry about the snow. They didn't have to worry about it. The snow was going to come later. And as it didn't come till actually Saturday night for most of Kentucky. And they had a great time. I thought it was a great idea, and it was born from Mark Bishop, the pastor at Grace Point in Louisville. And from my understanding, he had some other influence on some other people too. And I'm sure a lot of churches, actually, it wasn't just these 3 churches, who made a switch of service. I'm sure we probably had many churches throughout Kentucky who did the same thing. And, it's nothing that these did anything special. They just were among the churches that did that. And I thought it was a great idea, and it certainly worked for all 3 of them.
Chip, you had a similar story at 12 Stones Church in Elizabethtown.
Yes, and that decision for 12 Stones to move was direct input from Mark Bishop. Kenny Rager said it was Mark's idea. And, when we think about this, it's easy to look at the obstacles. All of a sudden you're going to move your church service from Sunday to Saturday. It's easy to look at the obstacles, but they did not do that. They looked at the opportunity. And 12 Stones usually runs, it's a church replant that Kenny Rager is pastoring. Usually run about 200 in worship. They had over 150, which is remarkable. And, they had to get music and volunteers and all of that together. What was so interesting, they played off of the weather. So after the service, they served snow cones and snow cream. And Kenny said, people were fellowshipping so much, I had to say, hey, folks, y'all cannot stay here because the snow's coming. But I really think that the tone that was set for this weekend, and as I talked to Mark Bishop, he said, so what happens if the snow does not materialize? You know what? You just had an extra worship service, and God has to be pleased with that. There is no downside to it. No, you might not be able to do everything exactly as you would, but where two or three are gathered, we know that the Lord's in the midst, and what a blessing to encourage people and to feed them the Word of God in the church setting. So again, I think it's probably thinking outside the box, but that's a good box to get out of.
Chip, you did a follow-up story, and it turns out that 12 stones moving at service may have prevented a big disaster.
It sure did. Kenny Rager was preaching. He noticed something was going on because he saw the security team stirring, and in their their furnace blower, black smoke was coming out. And so people jumped into action. Kenny said, I don't know if it would result in a full-fledged fire. We don't know, but it sure looked like it was a possibility, and said they had not adjusted any of the thermostats. So that black smoke coming out would have happened whether anybody was there or not. And he said it's just the providence of God that number one, Mark Bishop had talked to him about moving the service to Saturday. Then doing that where people were present in the building. He said it was certainly an act of God that they were there. No damage to the church building. A possible fire was avoided, and God was glorified in it all.
But, you guys have been in church leadership. Mark, you as a deacon chairman, and Chip, you as a pastor. These are difficult decisions to make. They don't like to close churches, but you have to think about the safety of your people. Some folks closed totally, some did online versions, some moved. And these are the decisions that pastors have to make. And sometimes, Mark, it's tough.
Yeah, pastors hate to close church on Sunday. They hate it. They want to lead their flock. That is their whole week, to see these people. I know our pastor, he was just heartbroken that we had to do the video church, and not do the in-person church when, that's one he wants to do. And all these pastors are like this. But, I thought Abram told me something at the end of it after I'd sent him some comments from, or some things that had happened at 12 Stones. And with, of course, he knew about Mark Bishop, and, they took up a $30,000 offering and had people at the altar and all kinds of things. But Abram said, it just proves that God can work any day of the week.
Yeah.
And, amen, right?
Amen.
Yes, and as you said, we're now hearing from other churches, Kentucky Baptist churches, who shifted their services. There weren't just these three. But shout out to Tanya White of Hartford Baptist, who wrote and told us about her church holding its service on a Friday, and it had 30 visitors, which is a lot for this very small church. So kudos to all those churches that adapted in one way or another to this storm.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for watching and for listening and telling others about the Kentucky Today podcast and KentuckyToday.com. And for more on the Kentucky Baptist Convention and the cooperative program that makes this program possible, go to kybaptist.org. We'll see you next time, Lord willing, on the Kentucky Today podcast.